Hey guys, welcome to another microclass here at Grass River Natural Area. Today I wanted to take a little bit of a break from talking about the seasonal phenomena and I want to focus on the big picture. Today I want to talk about rare animals that we have here at Grass River. So a little bit of a rare animal primer if you're not used to how endangered species regulations and policies work. First of all, there is the federal list, species that are endangered or threatened. There's two different designations. Endangered is more severely impacted, or their populations have dipped even lower than animals that are listed as threatened. But both endangered and threatened designations comprise the federal endangered species list. And so we have species like Canada lynx and eastern Massasauga and Kirtland's warbler that are on the federal endangered species list but live here in the state of Michigan. So in addition to that, each state also has their own list of species that are endangered or threatened in the state. And so oftentimes those are additional animals than those that are on the federal list. And so just like the federal list, the state list can include endangered designations or threatened designations. And then in addition to that, state lists often also have what's called a species of special concern. And this designation doesn't carry any legal power. There aren't any legal protections actually for these species, but they are kind of like a watch list species where if their populations dip any lower or they become even more threatened, then they'll likely be recommended to be added to the list. So in Michigan, we have almost 400 species of rare animals on this list that are either state endangered, state threatened, or state species of special concern. And so we have at least 22 of those that we found at Grass River Natural Area. And likely there are more because, as is the case with endangered and threatened species, they're difficult to find. They're rare, right? And so today I wanted to look at some of the ones that we see more commonly, learn a little bit about them and a little bit about the threats to them. So the first species I want to dive deeper into is the common loon. And we see and hear common loons quite frequently here at Grass River, especially in the summer. You can be standing at the center or the cabin and hear their calls all the way from the river. And it's known that there's at least one nest most years, most every year, on Clam Lake, about 4 in Lake Belair, and then 17 watershed wide throughout the whole Elk River chain of lakes watershed. So loon populations are remaining relatively stable in the state of Michigan. We would like to see them increasing, but there are several threats that seem to be preventing that from happening, at least thus far. And so the one major threat is actually lead poisoning. And loons will oftentimes pick up small lead sinkers or jigs from the bottom of the lake bed and swallow them to store in their crop. Birds often do this with little rocks or pebbles. It helps them grind their food in their gizzards because birds don't have teeth. But loons often mistake these lead pieces of fishing tackle for pebbles. And so that can cause lead poisoning when the lead gets into their bloodstream. It can cause a whole host of problems that make them more vulnerable to predation, and also it makes it hard for them to forage. So things like tremors, difficulty breathing, loss of balance. So the best thing you can do for loons, if you are a avid fisher person, is try to use lead-free tackle. All right, another threat to loons is just increasing development around lake shores and increasing boat traffic because the wakes that boats make, if they're high enough, often swamp loon nests. When they roll over them, loon nests are built pretty much at water level on either artificial or natural platforms. Then the last threat that I really want to talk about is relatively recent, and we're talking about type E avian botulism. So it appears that loons can get botulism from ingesting fish that have this toxicity. And the fish probably get it from it coming up the food chain and starting with aquatic macroinvertebrates that feed on the lake bed, and if they're eating decaying algae, they can acquire botulism. And so this has been responsible for, unfortunately, some relatively large-scale die-offs of loons in the area. Recently, I know last year at Sleeping Bear Dunes, they lost about 25 that all washed up at once. And it's not really well understood all of the factors that are playing into increases in avian botulism, but there's a lot of ongoing research on that. And I should mention that common loons are listed as threatened on the Michigan list, and so is the next species that I want to talk about, trumpeter swans. And you might see swans a lot around northern Michigan, but likely what you're most commonly seeing are mute swans, which are actually considered an invasive species. They are non-native and introduced from Europe, and they are really easy to identify by this big, knobby, bright orange bill. And their necks kind of create a very graceful S shape, whereas trumpeter swans have a completely plain black bill, and their necks are generally straighter. And we see trumpeter swans here at Grass River pretty frequently, especially in the winter time, where they use the unfrozen sort of mouth of Finch Creek, where it flows into Grass River right before Grass River flows into Clam Lake. They use that open water quite a bit in the winter. And trumpeter swans, their populations were really low in the early 1900s, and they've really rebounded and their populations are still increasing. They're kind of considered one of those classic conservation success stories, but there still are some threats that are impacting their populations rebounding so much that they're removed from the state list. And some of those threats are the same as those that impact the other water bird we talked about, the loon. So lead poisoning, also habitat destruction just from lakes being developed around their edges. But also for trumpeter swans, shooting is actually a common threat for them, whether it's accidental, if people are mistaking them for snow geese, or it's intentional. And then also collisions with power lines, especially the long migration routes. So there's a lot of projects around the country to mark power lines, tie things on them, make them more visible to tundra swans so that they minimize collisions with them. The last rare species I want to talk about specifically is the red-shouldered hawk. And we see these frequently when we're paddling the river. Sometimes they're sitting up, in a white pine or a tamarack, perched at the top. And they nest in mature forests near wetlands and swamps. And so Grass River is a great place for them. And their original decline happened back in the mid 1800s to early 1900s, when it was the heyday of logging, because remember, again, they need these mature forests in order to nest. But today, the population center in Michigan is located in the northern lower peninsula, so right where we are, and it does seem like it's slightly increasing. The threat still of habitat destruction and habitat fragmentation, meaning like a little pocket of forest here, a little pocket of forest here, not much corridor of mature forest in order to travel between them, and loss of breeding connectivity between different populations. That habitat destruction and fragmentation is still a threat today. So, hope you guys learned something today, and remember, I just talked about 3 of the more than 22 species that we have here at Grass River Natural Area that are on the Michigan Endangered, Threatened, or Species of Special Concern lists. I happen to talk about 3 birds, but that's just because those 3 species are threatened. Many of the other species we have here are just special concern, but lots of stuff, from pickerel frogs to Blanding's turtles, wood turtles, smooth green snakes, little brown bats, yellow-banded bumblebees, mud puppies. Yeah, so for a full list of the fauna that we have here at Grass River, I'll put a link in the description to this video. But otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.